there is a difference between service and prostitution. Today, a lot of people are prostitutes, and they are not having intercourse, but they're selling their time, they're selling their values. They are going against a fundamental rule that is to think, feel, and do the same thing. Chaos is necessary. People suffer. It's part of it. Cruelty exists, you know? Those weird people we start to learn about and that are coming out, we see Epstein files and all of that. It's there, okay? But beware that it doesn't happen through you. That's my number one advice. Because if we don't accept cruelty, and that we understand that it's part of, like, the chaos is part of the system, we will suffer because of its existence, or we will close our eyes and do as if it's not there. When fear comes, it means that you're too much forward, you have to come back. And when the sorrow pulls up, it means that you're pulled back. And this actually opens a very big door in even like quantum physics. And you know, what would happen if I told you that our future is pulling us forward? The whole concept turns around.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Awareness Club podcast. Today, my guest was living in different cultures and he was searching all his life for meaning and for sources of inspiration into discovering the oneself. Today, he is working with energy and helping people restore their self, evolve, and understand better how to live this world. I have here with me Emir Lhiba.
Hello, I'm happy to be with you.
So let's give a little bit of context of who you are and how did you arrive at this point in life into putting together different cultures, different wisdoms, and your personal filter into interpreting all of them.
Mm-hmm. So, my name is Emir, first of all. I live and work in Nice, French Riviera. And I started my quest towards energy when I was a kid. I was always very impressed by all of that, you know, like Chinese martial arts movies, you know, when you saw all of those expressions. And slowly but surely, it took me towards experiences and I saw things. And then, of course, life took me back into a normal routine. You know, school. I went to a catering school, wearing suit and tie, you know, learning how to behave, shave. And it took me into tourism and into luxury hotels, you know, working with people. And the funny part is that at a certain moment, I was also on the side practicing breakdance.
Oh.
Yeah. And friends of mine asked me to go with them on a trip to China. And that trip was mind-blowing, you know. I went there in between two jobs. And I remember just before going to that trip, one lady in a hotel in Nice was going to receive me for the season. And I had the contract already signed. Beautiful lady, 30 years old. Very, like, good communication, you know. I was very impressed by her. I was young at that age. I was like 21, 22. And so the chemistry went well and I had my job. So I went to that trip with my friends to China, which was mind-blowing, you know. And I remember that coming back from the trip, that lady told me that in the morning, I was going to experience jet lag the day that I started. So she asked me to come in the afternoon because it was Friday, just before the weekend, so that I get introduced to the team and then start on Monday fresh. Coming back from the trip, me sleeping, my phone rings. Somebody very weird talking to me. Yeah, you have to start work today. Where are you, gentleman? You know, not the lady. So I say, yes, I had an agreement to come in the afternoon. He said, okay, come, we'll explain to you. I arrive in the so-called hotel. The office was in the basement. There were no windows. And the lady in question had a cerebral accident. Half of her body was paralyzed. And of course, she was not working anymore. So I ended up, after that nice trip, with a lot of information, in that cellar, you know. And after 10 days, I resigned. And basically that step took me towards working with people, refreshing, restarting you know.
But you have all the context of your life. It's beautiful, amazing, and it brings together so many pieces that it was a challenge for you to put together. And here I'm referring, and I would like for you to make a tapestry of your father and what he was doing.
Of course.
And then in Austria, the part in Austria, and let's give a little bit of context.
Yeah. So before all of that, my context comes from a hippie couple who fell in love in the 80s, you know, my parents, who took me on a journey with them, you know. It was their journey. It's how we experience life, you know. Mm-hmm. So the journey of our parents. I greet them, by the way. And so I was born in Austria, countryside, you know, very rural. And I spent 7 years there growing up. Big connection with my grandmother, you know, animals, nature, very inspiring. And then we moved to Tunisia, where I spent 9 years. Complete change of culture in the 90s. No internet, you know, no PlayStations, just rocks and sticks, you know, in the streets. But it was very nice. It was very culturally rich. And also my father was very into martial arts. So from my young age, I was introduced into Chinese martial arts, Korean martial arts. And that gave me a big, push into that world, yeah. Extreme Oriental philosophy, you know. We had the Tao Te Ching in the library, you know, when I was a kid. It was already there.
And this is one part of the context. What is with your grandmother that was healing without knowing how is healing?
Yeah, of course. So as a kid, these experiences are I want to say pure, you know, when your grandma takes you by your hand and pulls you into weddings, funerals, you know, traditional lifestyle. And of course, when somebody gets hurt and somebody has evil eye or whatever, you see and experience directly all the ancient rituals, you know, so you get impressed by that, yeah. Of course, it touches you here before you understand.
And what was she actually doing? What she was practicing into healing?
It's ancestral medicine, you know, like today we talk a lot about shamanism, you know, energy work. We put words on things, we label them. But in traditional societies, these things were made naturally, you know, by putting your hands, reading prayers, you know, using incense and so on, you know, like.
How much of that is part of your work today?
I think the essence of it is there. Of course, I have to adapt to a Western and modern frame. And also, I had to expand towards knowledge and techniques to find my way, you know. Mm-hmm. It's very important. The world changed a lot the last 50 years. We are all seeing that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to keep on changing. So it's very important to adapt what we do to the space and time in which we are.
And your life philosophy, it's based on what? And what it's your today's belief system.
The question is very technical. My current belief system is basically very simple. You know, I went through a lot of experiences and quests, especially being part of different cultures. There is always a part of us that needs to adapt and please the others, you know. But becoming a father and making work on you shows you that the true path at the end of the day, it's all about love, you know. At the end of the day, it's all about love.
But overpassing this normal framework, what are the cultures and how did they impacted you? Because this gives a context into how do you approach life and how do you see the humans around you.
Of course. So as a kid and a teenager, you're part of something. So you experience it as a kid. Your point of view is special. And so naturally you want to adapt and you want to integrate the culture that you live in. Then when you become a teenager, you become a little bit rebellious. You don't want to behave the way people tell you, so you go into alternative cultures, you know, hip-hop culture, punk culture, you know. It's very like out of the system to create a new one, you know, turn the negative into positive and all of that. We went through that when we were youngsters. But then when you grow into an adult, you need to find a reconciliation between all of those parts. And what brought me a lot of peace was the discovery of a primordial tradition, a concept by René Guénon, a French author from the 20th century, who speaks a lot about the link between traditions, between like metaphysical concepts. And that brought a lot of peace to me at the time where I was searching, because I was always rejecting one part of my family. And when I entered into that realm where I understood that things were connected, it gave me more freedom to explore. And that freedom actually brought me into Chinese medicine, into Indian healing systems, into Sufism, into African, Egyptian alchemy, and so on.
So if this is your foundation, let's go just a little bit deeper into people that never heard about it, to understand how does it function and why it is a link between others.
We live in a world where conflict is king. And especially today in the Western modern era, the ideology that we live in is a neo-colonialist ideology. The West conquered the East. There is the power, the market, and so on. And on a spiritual level, this was developed by the Crusades, first of all, but then it was also developed by the communist ideology, you know, Marx and so on. And today it's developed by the push of science, of materialism, you know, modern society. And if we see spirituality through that eye, we will either reject it or see it from a Western point of view. But the truth is that more than 80% of the population of this world live on the other side. Okay? They live in different conditions with different accesses, and they are much more rooted into something that's ancestral than us. So it's very hard to undo yourself from that conditioning to see the world through neutral eyes. But primordial tradition gives you the freedom to see different traditions that might seem opposite, part of something bigger. And that's very freeing. On a physiological level, in modern science, there is a theory that we are not able to make these steps because of caloric deficits. Like our brain is trained to hold calories for us to think further. So we need to push our brains, literally, to spend that extra calorie to understand that behind that wall there is another world, you know. Behind the mountain there is a mountain, and so on. Yeah.
So the essence of all the questioning is, who am I?
Yes.
How would you describe and define this question for yourself?
The I, you know, comes from the I. I like those games.
Yeah.
And it's the way we see ourselves. And how can we see ourselves if we don't use a mirror? So it brings us to that construct, to that role that we play. And that role can be liberating, but it can also be a prison. And the way I like to see the I, this is something that Sufism brought me a lot, is to see it like a horse. A horse, when you get it in nature, it's wild, it's beautiful, right? Like a young lady, she's wild, beautiful. But try to mount it. It's impossible. Very hard. Passion, fire, right? So it takes a lot of time and patience to transform that horse into a rideable horse. Okay? So the first step is to recognize the horse, to have the courage to connect. You might get beaten in the beginning, no? And then to slowly create a relationship, create trust, and finish by mounting it. That's the second level. The problem with mounting is that it's ordinary and it's boring. That horse loses its beauty. It loses its temper because it behaves, right? And so the last step, which is commonly shown in symbolism by the horse with wings, you know, is to release the horse. But as you build the trust, it might fly. So that's the last part, you know. The other image might be the caterpillar that transforms into a butterfly, you know. It's the same, like those images, we have them everywhere in nature. So that's how I see the relationship to the I.
And all these transformations arriving to your work, you see them in the body, you feel them in the body when you work with people?
Of course. The body is the vehicle. So at the end of the day, the true horse is the body. You know, our body is our spirit's horse. And our emotions are the experience of the ride. So the body keeps information, gives feedback, and it's not dissociated from the mind. They work together. Like if for example, I tell you, where are you right now in your body? You don't know. You're everywhere and you're nowhere. But you could not dissociate your image and your I from your image. So they are linked.
But thinking about your evolution from martial arts to arriving to this point when you are working with energies into healing purposes, how do you feel the body and how do you feel the energy flow? And what is this exchange between you feeling and you working with it?
So the exchanges can be multiple. And there are different ways to interact with a person. And for me personally, it's very important to have a positioning which is neutral, where there is consent, and where you reply to a demand. Like for example, in the Taoist philosophy, you never act if you're not asked to act. Because if you act by yourself, it's your ego that acts through you. When you act regarding a question, you only reply to the universe. So you do your part. So that's very important. And so regarding that, it's all about what the person wants, her condition, and then, of course, what the spirit says, what the emotions say, and what the body says.
Yes, but while the desire, it's a different way that you are working, for example, with a person that is coming to you with an emotional problem and the person that is coming to you with a physical problem.
Of course.
And in the end, they are interlinked and you are working with both of them.
Yes. So the difference will be that in both cases, I will touch the person, but the emotional body, so-called, in modern energetics, that's how it's called, does not reply to the same principles that the physical body. So the pathways and the meridians and points and energy centers will not reply the same way. Also, what is very important to understand is that when we work on somebody, generally, there are two main aspects on which we work. Either it's a horizontal aspect, where we work on exchange of inner climate and outer climate, which can manifest physically, emotionally, and psychologically. You see, when it's winter and it's gray, your mood is not the same than when it's spring and sunny. But you also get a cold when it's cold outside, and you can get a fever when it's too hot. And further than that, you can be fearful when it's winter because your instincts don't feel safe, and you can feel ecstasy and highly aroused states during summer because everything is warm and you feel abundance. So climate has effect on the three levels. That's horizontally. The next step, which is combined, is the verticality. And the verticality is the potential we have, our blueprint. That's how some people will call this. In Chinese, it's called the primordial energy, ancestral energy, which will express through the layers of our personality so that we become who we're supposed to be.
Who we supposed to be or who we want to be?
That's a key question. who you're supposed to be and who you want to be is based on your level of consciousness. Because you cannot compare the need of a kid to the need of a teenager to the need of an adult. And here we're talking about archetypes, because there are a lot of adults who behave like kids and teenagers, and sometimes you find kids and teenagers who are already in the adult state. This is something very interesting to see.
How the life forges us.
Exactly. When we start in the kid level, we are very linked to the earth. Okay? So we're linked to our mothers. We are beings that develop by help, outside help, you know, like we need our mothers. We need the community. If you see fish, for example, they don't know their parents. The fish puts its egg somewhere and leaves. Turtles, the same. Try to put a baby somewhere and leave him. You will see what happens. So we are very slow in our development, and that's the earth part. So in Chinese philosophy, there is this concept of heaven, man, and earth. Earth being yin, what nourishes us. So that's that kiddish, nourishing, mothery. The words used are carrying and feeding. Okay? And we have the sky, which is heaven, which is conceptual. And in that we have protection and covering. The sky covers everything, right? And within that we have the human. And the human has a bit of both. And what's specific to the human is his emotional sphere. So if you take a human body, your feet are in the floor, your head is in the sky, okay? But your heart, the heart of your nervous system, your solar plexus, all of that is in the middle, and that's where you get the emotions in. So becoming who you're supposed to be is the way the heaven wants you to incarnate into earth. The way you want to be is your earth that replies to heaven. And the communication between those two happen within your emotional system. And that's actually the human state. So in traditions, there are heavenly traditions. It's all about going up, ascension, astronomy, astrology, numbers, you know, divination, Yi King, tarot, all of that. All of that is yang, you know, how to communicate with what we don't see. Then you have traditions that are earth traditions, where you incarnate, you meditate, you sit, you serve, and so on. And then there is the human one, which is a mix of both, but which is based on your emotional system. And like the true human alchemy happens in here, you know. It's not up here and it's not down there.
Yeah, because most of the times in spirituality, it's this perception that you need to dissociate yourself from who you are. You need to let aside the ego. You need to go into higher spaces and so on. When in the end, it's also a part of this reality being lived as it is, and this life having a purpose of manifesting your potentiality. So you cannot just go outside without grounding yourself, because you're losing the essence of what actually means to be alive. And this is the middle ground that you are speaking. And also this comes to how this is present in the body, and what you are doing as a healer. It is actually helping making a more clear path of who we truly are. So this comes to the point that we are choosing a destiny before we are incarnating? Do you believe that?
The problem is that, you know, like scriptures, Bible, Quran, Vedas, those scriptures are symbolic and they have multiple lectures. And so when we talk about destiny, if we see it in a linear way, if we see it in a way that it's predefined, we limit it to our understanding. The way I like to see it personally is that if you watch nature, everything has a purpose. Nothing is built by accident. And even if it seems like an accident, it is either a room for improvement or an adaptation. Okay, because everything is renewed. So as we are part of that nature system and we are dependent on it, the same rules apply to us. So I think it's very important to not see energy or metaphysics or your path, we call it the way you want, but to not see it like a subject at school, you know, because we were conditioned a little bit that way, but to see it more than something that's moving, that's systemic, that's alive, you know, that personally gave me a lot of insight. And when you go back to scriptures, techniques, you know, philosophies, at the end of the day, the essence matters. There is that saying of people where you say that you show the moon, but the person looks at the finger, you know? So it's very important to not watch the finger, but to focus on the moon.
So now we are going into a practical side. And I would like to ask you, for example, there are many people that want to improve their life. And maybe this is the reason why they are looking now at this podcast. For example, if you want to change something, whatever it is, the profession, your relationships, and so on, how do you conduct this change when your subconscious it's coming back to what it is used to and it's creating the circumstances into keeping you into the same position?
That's a very good question. So here, there is a big conditioning that comes from our unconscious cloud that tells us that things are black or white. And actually in our pre-rational development, the back of our head here, we have to understand that fire burns, that if we fall from height, it kills us, that if you drink the soap, you die when you're a kid, you know, that the car might hit you. So at that level, black and white exists, you know, heaven and hell exists at that level. So it's either you survive or you die. But then when you grow up, especially when you start to fall in love, you see that sometimes something very good might hurt you. But also that hard work pays. And so it's not heaven or hell anymore, but it's heaven and hell. There's a bit of each in everyone, like the yin-yang sign. And here, we become rational. We start to calculate because we know if I do this, I will have that and so on. And there is a bit of malice that shows up because we are naturally driven to opportunity. But also that system has a limit because at a certain level, when we reach the ends of the game, we understand that we don't understand anything. And there is neither one or the other. They disappear. And so that's that concept, which is very powerful in its own, is very useful at that level to implement that understanding and to enter into therapy. You know?
But on a practical level, this therapy,
Yes.
how does one evolve into it, into making the actual change?
So once you understand those 3 steps, and you confrontate those backups that you talked about, where you go back to a certain way of function, you understand that it's a mechanism of habit, that mechanism of habit is neither good or bad, because it has good parts, you know? Like, for example, we speak English right now. It's not our mother tongue. We learned it, both. And we are remembering it to use it right now. So that's a backup. It's very useful. If that backup would not sit correctly in your system and mind, we would not be able to have this conversation.
Sure.
Okay. But it happens to us to implement something and to take something out. We make mistakes. We don't use the right verb. We don't use the right term. Okay. So then we go into the system and we change. So it's neither good or bad. It's useful. And that creates confidence. It releases the fear which holds back. And from there, we can then slowly go into the desire.
It's also a brain function that it's consumed the smallest amount of energy into coming the pattern that is most used to, and in which the predictions of creating reality are mostly accurate. And it needs a lot of energy in order to overpass when it misunderstood, because you want to make a change, it actually gives an error to prediction, which uses more energy. And now we are coming into how this is shown up into the body with the people that you are working.
It's a belief problem.
Belief.
It's a belief problem. We live in a world where we drink the cup and we throw it away. Where we buy a phone and 1 year later the new one comes out. Where what our parents did is less good than what we do, and we want better for our kids. So if we apply that same narrative to our functions, and we believe that they are lesser good, or that they are impulsive, or that they are coming from animals and evolution, we don't give them the right respect. And how do you want to create a solid relationship? How do you want to create trust? And how do you want to implement something that you don't respect in the first place?
This is actually the same definition as what it means neutrality and what it is neutrality on the frequency of Hawkins.
When you drive a car and you drive it at 130 kilometers, and then suddenly you go into the reverse mode, what happens to your engine?
Is this true?
It breaks. So neutrality is key to shift from one state to another. The big example that we have in nature that's very common in Chinese medicine, but also Indian and even European, calendars, is the seasons. We don't go from hot to cold. There is spring and there is autumn. And even from winter to spring, there is a transition. From spring to summer, there is a transition, and so on. It's the same when the sun comes up and the sun goes down. The light doesn't shut down like we do with a button, It comes gradually and it leaves gradually. And that space is a protection, and it's a space of transfer. And if we go back to brain waves and all those studies, we can see that our brain waves change in those periods, and that even within our hormonal system, there are things that happen. We are linked to all of that. It's deeply rooted in us. And again, it brings us back to that respect. But if we are used to turn on, turn off, AC, heater, eating mango in the winter, and eating raclette cheese in the summer, it doesn't happen, So it speaks a lot of our modern way of living.
And you are working mostly with the body. How much doing all sorts of therapies and working from magnetism? I know that this is a word also. We need to define this as well. How much does this help, and how much does it help the self-inquiry and conscious awareness that we are bringing? Where is the middle ground to evolve?
Okay. So me personally, if I chose today to work with my hands, to touch people, and to work through the body, it's first of all because it's the modality in which I feel the most comfortable. That's a personal and even a, let's say, egoistic or like personal choice. Okay? It's very important if you want to do good to feel good. Before I used my hands to heal people officially, I did 5 years of classical acupuncture with the needles, the cups, the massage techniques. I studied a lot of PNL coaching. And even before that, I used to coach people on a regular basis, physically, Qigong classes. I went through the whole spectrum. But what stuck to me and where I felt the most comfortable was to work with the body. So I don't say this is better than something else. For me, it's my thing. Now, the people coming to me, they come to me by different means. And I think there is a very important aspect, which is that the people, when they go and see someone, the decision needs to come from them. They need to be driven towards any technique. If you work with an intermediary, for example, I worked with centers who send me people and so on, the results were not the same because the relationship is not the same and there is somebody in the middle. It happens also sometimes when, for example, a wife takes an appointment for her husband and he comes, but he doesn't come to get treated. He comes to please the wife. So you need to work on that first, and then you can potentially arrive. So the trust is the key. And the trust cannot be built if the initiation doesn't come from the person. So in any type of healing energy work, from the most psychological to the most physical, the posture of the therapist needs to be to have an open door. But that's it. And you wait for it to come. It's very counterproductive for our society, and it's very hard to pay your bills working that way. But
sounds also as the definition of a projector in the human design system when they are waiting for the invitation in order to function.
If you go into human design, it's very interesting. You have the four main characters, but those four main characters, they're also very close to the four main brainwaves, if we want to mix those two subjects. And in order to manifest, to be on the yang side, you need to first play the projector role, because otherwise, where do you manifest from? If I ask you to jump right now, if you don't have a place where you push your leg, you cannot. If you're in space and in the void, you can try to swim and do whatever. There will be no, the 3 first laws of Newton, So that yin state and receptive state is key. In Chinese philosophy, the universe started with one yin point from which everything expanded.
With yang force.
Which is the expression after,
Yeah. Do you see how this system overlaps, like human design with the energy work that you are doing?
Today, we have a lot of new systems, relatively new, that came with the hippie revolution, 70s, 80s, substances, studies, chemistry, that brought insights. From a traditional perspective, it is very important to keep your distance with those techniques without having a blueprint that works for you. It's important from my perspective to study a tradition that gives you a whole frame. What does that mean? That means it gives you a way that you act in society, Earth, a way to understand how your energy moves, especially your emotions, human, and then it gives you a belief system and a cosmogony, which allows you to understand the hierarchy of what we don't see. And all common big traditions, from Taoism to Hinduism, monotheist to spirituality, you can have it in systems like Masonry, you can have it in African systems, you can have it in shamanism, South America, North America. Everybody has its own way to express this. Once you have that big common ground, ideally coming from where you come from, so that you are also rooted to your ancestors, which is very important. You didn't come by yourself into this world. Then you can take those new techniques and see them through the traditional lens. For me, that's key to not get lost. Because at the end of the day, all of these systems talk about the same thing. Regarding that, it is non-negotiable at a certain level to understand that we come from somewhere and that we go somewhere, and that nothing is completely random, to easily reply to your question.
Synchronicity is a rule of consciousness.
If you never drank coffee, I can write books about it. But as long as you don't taste it, you don't know.
Sure.
So you can believe in something, but as long as you don't taste and you don't get confirmation, it will be only illusion. So synchronicity, we can talk about it, but as long as it didn't happen, it's not there. And once it happens, it's not there neither. It went, but things changed. This is very important. And synchronicity and confirmation within the Sufi tradition is only there so you can reach serenity. And it's very important to not become an addict to confirmation. If there is one thing that people can take with them, is to not become an addict on confirmation. You got your confirmation, good. Now you have serenity. Now, as you have serenity, you can see the world without anxiety. And if you can see the world without anxiety, you're a better human.
What is the definition? We arrive to serenity, and I think we need to also define the terms that we are using.
Yes.
What is the point between serenity and peace? Yes. Acting with peace and acting with serenity, and
so peace is a high archetype. You cannot be in peace all the time. It's an illusion. It's like telling you you can be in bliss all the time. Or if you have an orgasm and you hold it for 10 months, it's not possible. So peace is the same. But it's the same with sorrow. It's the same with anxiety. And a lot of people experience it and stay locked there, and it's very uncomfortable. So those are states. And states appear without announcement. People can only practice to create conditions for the states to manifest in a harmonious way. Some people provoke states, but they pay the price of the provocation. A lot of people today use psychedelics, use substances that are traditional and common, substances that are more lab-based, okay?
But nevertheless, they are the foundation of many different cultures, and they are always as a fundament for different religions.
That's not questionable. The part that is important is that we don't live in the same world. So there is a Sufi master who said, the last years, we live in a time where it's as easy to travel for pilgrimage than to access knowledge, than to attain levels of sainthood. What does he mean by that? He means that a pilgrimage to any site, which lasted for months, years back in the days, today you do in 24 hours by plane with AC, nice food, right? Knowledge, which was even a higher quest because you had to go to a place where there were books. Books were held by certain caste members. You had to gain the trust and respect of masters so you could learn. All of that is wiped out by internet access, AI, and so on. So that transformation is huge. But in the invisible world and into the access to states, this changed too. It didn't remain at the same level. So back in the days when people used to ritualize, first of all, they didn't open like tourism agencies to go into the unknown. Everything was ritualized. The moon phases were studied. The sun phases were studied. The spirits of nature were harmonized. The ancestral background was harmonized, which is very important when you open doors to the unseen.
And also a support of the full community.
The support of the community was there. The roles were defined. The castes were defined. And most importantly, the intention was noble. Everybody was going into the same direction. And within that, there is very small space for addiction to confirmation. Because first of all, it's normal. It's nothing fancy. You know, you have a shaman in your tribe. It's not a weird guy with dreadlocks. It's your uncle, you know? It was used to survive because there was insight and input to evolve. People were living in very rough conditions. No electricity, no hot water, no transportation. It's another world. No light in the evening, you know? No heater. We forget that. Like the most common poor person in Europe has more luxury than a pharaoh.
And yet, just to continue the discussion, I remember another discussion that I was having with another person that was in the energetic world and bioenergotherapist. and it was telling me exactly about the world of shamans and about what was happening, let's say 500 years ago or 1000 years ago, and how the layers between darkness and light are thinner and thinner, and how substances that 1000 years ago only were taking you to the bridge of the experience now are ejecting you through all the layers.
Of course.
Because it's this shift between the shadow and the light.
Imagine that every thought, every image, every word, every emotion, every movement, okay, creates information. And that information moves in a huge cloud. Okay? If people live in a traditional, normal society, the layers between the informational world and the heavens, where archetypes reside, some people call them angels, some people talk about entities, depends what words you use, but there is something going on there. That layer was very thin. And so communication was very easy. When somebody had bad intention, everybody knew it. And there was even a way to deal with these people because societies were inclusive. Today, we have phones, emails, we have social media that creates thousands of millions of emotions a day. And we go from rockets to porn to cats doing kung fu moves, you know? And all of that pollutes that informational system. Okay? So when one person out of all these people that are in that void wants sincerely, and here we go to the heart, wants sincerely to reach higher, it gets VIP treatment. But also going down. Never forget. Okay? And to go further in that way, everybody wants VIP treatment. Okay? But nobody knows how to use the parachute when they go down. That's a big problem. You should never jump higher than what you can land.
And yet you never know.
You know by having a master. Because that you don't know can be taught by somebody who knows.
So you say that it is not wise to rise without a master?
Traditions say that a journey of 200 years can be made in 2 hours with a master. Because looking for the right set is like you looking for a ring in the desert. Masters know where the ring is buried.
How would you define the masters of today? Where do we find
That's a very, very, very good question. First of all, the more you think that somebody is a master, the less he is, especially today. Because the pressure of the actual world is so hard, and the war between the two sides of the force is so strong that masters are more and more hidden. Back in the days, people used to hide outside of communities. This is why you get all those tales. The master in the cave, the master by the sea, the master in the forest, and so on. Today, where is nature? We are in a global world. Everything is full. Okay? And so the escape is no more towards the cave. It's inside. So the more they have to hide, the more ordinary they become. And sometimes they even start to do weird things so that people think the opposite about them.
So you would say that silence is a sign of evolution?
It can be a sign of evolution, but it can also be somebody who is very timid and holding back. It's not enough. What I personally experienced is that there are people who you can just sit next to and they are able to tell you more than a lifetime without talking. And again, if you don't taste the coffee, you don't know. So what I invite people to do is, first of all, like there is that common phrase that you find on T-shirts and in yoga centers. When the student is ready, the master appears, right? It's a very common one. So it's interesting to get ready. How do you get ready? Is by being sincere. Sincerity is the key.
Firstly, with yourself.
It's the quest is only with yourself. The master, you know, like it's very interesting. Like in your website, you write no guru, and it's very important to not put idolship on somebody. It's not somebody who is better than you or who you're gonna follow or so on. No. First of all, it's a heart relationship. When you find a person that truly inspires you, it's like when you fall in love with somebody. When you fall in love with somebody, you don't know what happened. You're like, wow, I'm in love, you know? But when you get inspired, it's a different type of love. Like there is the love with the small L and there is the love with the big L. Different chemistry. And so if you're sincere and if you're also vulnerable enough, that's another one, very important. You might understand that what you are looking for is just next to you, you know.
What the world is around us is reflecting what we need to see and what we need to do, no?
You see, we live in a world where air is available. It could be sold. We live in a world where the sun comes up every day. We didn't sign a contract with the sun, you know? We live in the world where the food that grows the nearest to us is the most beneficial for the climate in which we live, right? And so emotionally, we also live in a world where the people that surround us create the system in which we are supposed to be. Today, it's very hard to accept that because everybody wants to interchange, you know? All these concepts are very challenged today. And on a spiritual perspective, we live in a world where we are at the right time at the right spot, you know? Basically, that's it.
Synchronized. So having this context and using all the branches that you are mentioning, how were you helping athletes into performing better?
Yeah, that's a very good one. So for me, athletes are the most interesting people to work with, but at the same time are the hardest on a moral perspective. Why? An athlete wants to reach a goal. and is able to sacrifice a lot to get there. What does that mean? Physical injuries, emotional imbalance, and even psychological damage. So, will you get results with these people? Yes. Are they supposed to do what they do? Okay. And at what level am I harming the person by helping that person to reach that goal?
So it's a moral issue for you?
It's very difficult because I believe that my job influences a lot. And so if I do something that might go into a doping, overtraining, pushing too much, I might start to enter the dark side of the force, And it's very tempting. It's very important also to open that side because there are people who are doing energy work on both sides.
How it is white magic, black magic?
That's a way of seeing it.
Of seeing.
The word magic is very technical because it has a negative and a positive connotation.
Mm-hmm.
There is a difference between a magician and a sorcerer, for example. A magician in traditional classical Northern European philosophy and spirituality is actually a person of faith. But that today we don't really put on the floor because the church, they made a great job to burn witches and so on. But there was a spirituality that's anterior of Christianity in Europe. And actually Christianity is an Eastern religion. We forget that sometimes with those white Jesus faces in American churches. But that guy comes from Palestine.
Sure.
A sorcerer is somebody who's going to use words in a certain way. And today there are a lot of sorcerers, marketing, brands. That's all magic if you see it from an initiated eye. And the key of these techniques is the intention. And the intention, again, it's supposed to be set on a traditional framework. This is why I go back to having a tradition. A solid faith is the key to not get lost. If you use a modern system that has very powerful emotional or spiritual or physical tools, but that doesn't give you the full deal, when you will reach in your development a certain level, you will get lost. And some people need to play with that and they need to fall on their noses, It's part of the deal.
So this was helping you as well into maintaining your equilibrium into this decision with athletes?
A lot. I had very, very, very interesting offers and I didn't even need to manifest that I don't go there because my intention was enough,
More practical, how do you define the boundary that you are just saying? From enhancing what your client can do to the point where
it's very simple. You need to read the intention of the athlete. Because for a same sport, two different athletes will have completely different outcomes. First of all, within their discipline, and then as a public person, there are a lot of athletes who do good to the world, You see Muhammad Ali, you see guys like Michael Jordan, they are figures, they push people. But at the same time, is it truly their destiny or not? And then further than that, which is the key today, unfortunately, it's all about money. Because the sports where there is engagement, football, tennis, American sports, mixed martial arts, all of those areas, golf a little bit, all those guys, they chase the dollar. And behind that, there is betting,
Of course.
sponsorship. And here we go back into that dark magic aspect.
But these are only elements that are in the ecosystem. But the fundamental desire of the athlete is to win.
The motivation, the number of people engaged, and the amount of people who will be broke in the process is not qualitative, it's quantitative. And it's very interesting, like the gentleman we talked about earlier, René Guénon, Primordial Tradition, one of his first books is called The Reign of Quantity and the Signs of the Ending of Times. What does that mean? That means that we live in a time now where quantity rules, which means that we're at the end of a cycle, we're not in the beginning. Because as long as it's not quality, you see, like the ethos of Greek Olympians, it's not to gain money. And there were no people in the arena to watch them. They were climbing a mountain and were performing it in a spiritual way, if you study that. Mm-hmm. At the other side, the Roman Empire, when the North African stock of food couldn't join Rome in time and a famine rose, they created the Colosseum, to hypnotize the people, and they made a show out of it. And these things are more than 2,000 years old. So it's nothing new. So I think if you want to improve a skill, your goal should be to practice it until you die, not to arrive at the finish line or at the check or at a main event at the UFC, You should practice till death.
Yeah, but in a competitional space is this potency of the body that is declining over 40s, and you are an athlete most of the times until your 40s.
This is very modern.
It's very modern.
This is very modern.
And it's very competitive.
This is very, very modern. I don't think that back in Rome, people were looking at performance and age because they were fighting till death, Mm-hmm. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Today it's about humiliation, it's about betting, it's about arranging things, you see it,
Yeah. So coming back to close the chapter of athletes, how would be the ideal way to support and to guide an athlete from the psychological to the spiritual to the philosophical? Mm-hmm. How would you create the environment for an athlete to flourish?
First of all, it's very important to understand that each one of us has a gift. And some of these people, they are very gifted. And so there is an image that I like to use a lot with my clients, is that there are mainly two types of people. This creates a frame, there is a graduation in between. But there are people who come into this world and they are gifted very early, piano virtuose, very good football player, singer, mathematician, all these genius kids that we see coming up very early, we like to watch on YouTube. But they are usually and in many cases, haunted. It's a curse over their heads by that gift. And the freedom, peace, won't come until that they can dissociate from the gift. On the other hand, you have people who try a lot of things. Okay, try football, not very good, hurt his knee, and he goes into this, that, has a dream, forgets about it, comes back, midlife crisis, starts again, see? And then at a moment, it's like a person in a jungle with a knife. At the moment, they find their treasure, And then,
Sounds organic.
Yes. And they get their peace there. And it's not even the fact that they reached it, it's that the path is finished, So when you have an athlete, first of all, it's very interesting to see where that person is on that grid, because you don't work with a person that is looking the same way for a person that already is haunted by something and that slowly needs to go away from it. That's number one. Then number two is to understand that gift and that potential can be used to harm the person and to help the person to reach things and goals. And so there again, it's interesting to find a system in which that person can work, can expand, use the tool and not be used by it, use the gift and not be used by it. And that can give very nice stories, I mean, the word is not black or white. They are very nice and impressive and motivational characters. Mm-hmm. But a life is judged by its end.
Mm-hmm.
Not by its beginning and not by the middle.
And what can you do for an athlete or for a normal person that comes your way?
Today, when I work with athletes, it's all about chemistry. I try to project nothing, and I just let the stream do its job. The more you project, the less it works.
What means to project, first of all?
So I had a very strong experience in my way to come to do what I do today, is that for a certain period, I worked with very wealthy people, and I did a lot of personal training. This was before the healing and before the Chinese medicine and before all of that. So I had the opportunity to make a lot of money, to go to very nice places, to work with important people. But the key was to create an experience and to go towards the person. Okay? So the person is late, they pay you the fee anyway, you get your money, you're happy, you go home. The person shows up, doesn't want to work in a certain way, you adapt. Okay? And of course, when you do that as between your 20s and 30s, you're very impressed. You see Ferraris, Lamborghinis, helicopters, private jets. You see it all, especially the Côte d'Azur. And so you frame that character that tries to adapt and please.
Servant.
Exactly. Service. The problem with the service is that it can reach a level where you're actually not serving the person's interests. You're serving what the person wants, not what the person is supposed to be, And so going towards Chinese medicine, going towards healing, going towards having an office and having people show up that are sick and that need help, and you being there with a referential and knowing what's good for them and what's bad for them, and understanding that some people, like they crave sugar and overeat it. People are drunk. People have bad habits, you know. You cannot please those people. You have to have a neutral positioning. And you need to even be yang. They are yin. You cover and protect, you know. They are laying down, you're standing up.
It's a bit a difference from servant to master.
It's I don't want to sacrifice the word servant, because the word servant is actually higher than master. It's a matter of perspective.
Yes.
It's not the service position that's wrong, it's what you serve.
Yes, correct.
And the problem is that when you start to serve in an age or a state of knowledge that is limited or young, you understand that you don't serve the same patterns, you know? And also, there is a difference between service and prostitution. This is very important. You know, today, a lot of people are prostitutes and they are not having intercourse, but they're selling their time, they're selling their values. They are going against a fundamental rule that is to think, feel, and do the same thing. So the word is strong, but literally that's it. On the other side, there are some prostitutes maybe that are servants, you know, because they apply to a demand. Even those people we should not sacrifice. Nobody should be sacrificed, you know.
Sure.
So that's very important.
Because you're speaking about this, looks like an alignment with yourself. When you are, it's the own truth that you need to respect from the thought to the action.
It's very hard to apply in today's world, but at the same time, I think that on a massive scale, it's the cure. Very easy.
But bringing it to a personal level, what means to you this alignment and how one can obtain it?
It needs practice.
What kind of?
The practice is a common practice. You won't get a result. For example, if you wear a nice legging and you wear your mat and go to a yoga class for 2 hours a week that you pay expensively in a nice place, and you have the incense and you chant the you know, and then you go back to your boring life and you have the stress and you have the alcohol and you have all of that. It's a lie. Practice is constant from when you wake up to when you sleep.
The art of living.
This is why we're here. This is why we're here. You know, like in Chinese philosophy, there is a very interesting concept. It was also developed later by people like Rudolf Steiner, German author, about cycles in life. Basically, from 0 to 30, you are living on a credit. What does that mean? Your parents, your mom, society, school, you know, everybody's feeding you, everybody's giving you clothes. Everything comes, education, experiences, relationships. And then the prototype slowly builds up, okay? From 27 to 33, very interesting period, you know, Christ's age and so on. But also it's the 27 club, you know, all these people who died. There, either you produce something, you leave this world, or you become a parasite. Very simple. Very hard, but it's the truth.
That can always be changed.
Of course. And then it's not even about it can always be changed. It goes even further than that, is that because once you become potentially active, it's like the flowers. Not all the flowers bloom at the same time. Some people, they bloom at 25, 27, they're gone. And they even contributed, a lot of artists, they come, they give their thing, and they're gone. And then you have people who bloom at 30, 35, 40. And you have people who bloom at 90. And it's very interesting, again, to see that. And the blooming is part as much of the nice flowers that smell good than the poisonous ones. So it's very important when you're able to see these evolutions to temper the poison, but also to garden the beauty. Very important. And once poison is somebody else's medication, of course.
How one evolves in life. The most important is this discipline, and with what is doing on a daily basis, ritual in living.
That's a very strong question too. There are mainly two big categories of people. There are people who are on a quest. People who are on a quest, it's like climbing. I like that example. First of all, there are those who open, they don't climb the same way that those who follow, because the security is not the same. And there are like stops. Once you reach a certain level, there you sit, okay? And you know that amount of, that level, it's like a video game, that level, it's done. You won't fall down, okay? And so those people, they need to reach levels, and of course they need rituals, they need to be punctual, they need to follow to build something. It's the image of that is also agriculture. If you want to grow something, if you're sedentary, you don't live the same way as a nomad. You have to work the earth, plant, wait, put the water, protect, and so on, harvest. So that's number one. On the other side, you have people who experience states. And those people, they are pulled into things. And if they are too rigid, either the pull breaks them or they refuse the call. See? And of course, there is a little bit of one in this one and a little bit of that one here. So it's important to see how the people are built to work with that. Somebody who is pulled, it's interesting to put cushions, because if they start to fly, you need to manage the way they fall. Somebody who is on a quest, if he waits to be pulled, nothing will happen. Okay? And then, of course, those who are pulled, who practice a quest, the quest will be there to harmonize their states. A person that is on quest might experience some pulls if the person is at the right spot at the right moment. Because at the climb, you will see, a nice sunrise, sunset, flower, bees, and so on. So you might get also your dose of state. But just to be clear, not everybody is the same. And the more we are able to work with that, the more results we get. It's practical.
Let's define a little bit from your perspective, embodiment. What does it mean and how does it help in the evolutionary process?
You can embody things by faking them, first of all. There are a lot of people, the common sentence, they fake it until they make it. Okay? And this is a process. And that process, it can be positive, meaning that they reach the goal, okay? Positive and negative, very sensitive words. And then there are, on the other hand, people who don't function that way. They embody by letting themselves be who they really are. And there, the layers are on the outside. They need to take the fake away. They need to take the mask off, you know? Again, one yin aspect, one yang aspect.
But is that something that you anyway need to do to take the mask away? Is not the only way, actually?
The thing is that everybody has his own mask.
Yeah. Or building masks according to the environment.
Exactly. And it's all about having a mask that fits you. You know? So sometimes you put the mask before the person, you put the horses before the chariot, you know? Or you put the chariot and then you put the horses. So within the process, if you want to help that experience, again, because position ourselves in a facilitating positioning, it's very important to understand what are we talking about. Are we talking about the horses or are we talking about the chariots, you know? If you misunderstand and you make a mistake, you will find either only horses or only chariots, and that doesn't work. And a lot of people are in those states, unfortunately. And then there are people who, you know, they are stubborn. It's horses, it's horses, it's horses, it's horses, you know? And those people, unfortunately, sometimes you have to add even more horses so they understand. You know? By telling them, no, you have to put it doesn't work. So sometimes you flip it on the other side. That's very yin-yang, that's very Taoist.
It does.
Everything dances, everything changes, there is a alternativity, you know, duality, it moves.
So, for example, if somebody comes to you because it decided that it cannot go further in life with the problems that they have, with a back pain, with headaches, with whatever, and you start working on those, do you also open the doors for awareness?
So that's a good question, because a lot of horses today. You can take the horse to the water, right? But it needs to drink. You cannot force. So of course, if somebody, we talked about alignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody has a problem here, right? And it's here, and we bring it back here. Of course, the planet will realign. And the opportunity, you know, the stream, you know, the kundalini, the small circulation, you call it the way you want, you know, it will happen naturally. But then it's the person's choice, karma, destiny to deal with that. And what I found the most by working with people is that at that level, I just let them be, you know? And then, of course, sometimes you receive a nice text message and you're happy, you know? And sometimes you don't see the person for 5 years and they come back and tell you, oh, it was good, you know? Yeah, it's nice, you know? That's what keeps me doing what I do.
And how would you advise people to work or to discover their own energy and how to rebalance themselves? Because we are in a chaotic world, and
Yes.
maybe people that are watching now are not doing for many years all sorts of practices into discovering which one they relate most with. But what would be, from your perspective, a starting point into tapping in?
When I have, like, especially people who come in first and who really have, you feel that they have the urge and the need to work on themselves, I give them a gift, okay? And the gift, it's a volume button, okay? Like on a radio. What does that volume button do? We live in a world where there is a lot of noise, okay? Public transportation, work, shopping centers, busy streets, traffic, you know? Just by saying it, you hear the noise already, right? But there are also places, people, situations where the music is nice, right? Nice view, nature, people you love, your kids, your grandparents, if they're alive and so on, you know? And so what I tell them and what that tool makes is that when the music is nice, turn the volume up. Listen, okay? And that's for the listeners. But it can also be see, you know? Widen the zoom of your phone, watch, okay? And it can be also kinesthetic, you know? Feel, okay? Feel the fabric of those nice clothes. Take it in, okay? Because we're in a culture where everybody is about performance, work, out, you know? Spend, okay? But we need first of all to learn how to work in, earn, you know? Slow down, number one. So in the good situations, turn the volume up, okay? When you leave or it changes, turn it down. Don't leave it up. Very important, okay? You can turn it out 45 and you can turn it down all the way 20. And then when you go into those places that are noisy, go to 0, go to -20, go to -45, okay? And play those nice songs on the inside. And that way, life becomes easier. What that technique does, first of all, it teaches you to be aware in a nice way, okay? I'm a person, I like nice things, you know? I like nice people, nice food, nice nature. I'm hypersensitive. If I just sit and meditate, you know, for 45 hours, hold the thing and breathe, doesn't work for me, okay? I need prima materia, you know? I need things to work with. So first of all, get things you work with. Beautiful flower, nice people, nice music, whatever. Take it in, okay? And then when you go into the noisy spots, learn how to bring it down. And this teaches you to be aware of both sides. And by being responsible of that volume button, you become more and more aware and you have control points in your day, okay? And the nice part about that, it works for people who climb and it works for people who get the states.
On this full transitions in a stress environment that most of people are working, when you have all these oscillations of emotions, from anger to fear to loving your kids to enthusiasm about the project, and then being breaking down by all the work, how to manage into creating a balance in your life and detaching and not being the emotion but feeling the emotion?
So first of all, we don't live in paradise, okay? But we don't live in hell either, okay? We live in the world. And the world is a mix of a little bit everything. We cannot enjoy if we don't feel pain. And we cannot enjoy pain if we feel enjoyment. There is contraction and there is relaxation, okay? Very strong attributes. And the way to deal with these things, first of all, it's hard, okay? And it's hard doesn't mean that you should not face it, okay? But it doesn't also mean that, oh, it's easy. No, it's hard. Even for me, it's hard. And the deeper that you go into real world, the harder it gets. This is why everybody wants to escape, to get drunk, to watch things, vacation, this, that, compensation, okay? The stronger the compensation, the stronger the pull back into the reality. Okay? So the stronger the relaxation, the stronger the contraction. And this is why not everybody is at the same level again. Those who are in contraction, they need to understand that there will be relaxation. It's like a lady giving birth, you know. I had the immense pleasure to assist the birth of my kids, you know. My wife was in labor. Hello. And you can see this, you know, contraction, stress, and then relaxation. We come into this world like this. So it's there, you know. So it's like the tide. So sometimes the contraction comes from too much expansion, you know. And sometimes the expansion is also a solution, but we don't see it. So we have to be aware of those things.
When we are thinking about masters, we are also associating with clear-minded, peaceful, and also in control without being in control. How is that, on what philosophy and on what perspective of life we can maintain that in order to be focused when we need to be focused and when to relax when we need to relax and not to get one mixed with each other?
First, it's to be aware. All the techniques, from the most modern to the most old, okay, from the most ecstatic music, dance, consumption, you know, to religious, very orthodox techniques, are based to keep your attention, you know? So doing one thing at a time, very boring, essential.
No multitasking.
No multitasking. Multitasking is a lie, okay? High frequency is something. Multitasking is something else, okay? And if we use modern terms, the key is efficiency, okay? And efficiency in 80% of the case is doing less, okay? The problem is that very powerful people understand that, but they don't share it with everybody. I gift it to you. It's free. Sometimes, and many times, you need first to step back.
And also, when you are not multitasking, you are present. And without presence, you are not embodied and you are not focused completely, no?
The sentence that I like to use, it's a Sufi concept that saints or people who are loved by God don't fear and don't get sad, okay? And it's actually a verse of the Quran, very powerful. What does that mean? Because we have to understand what's behind it, not the finger, the moon. When you're sad, you think about the past. Because you can only be sad about something that happened that is not anymore. You cannot be sad about the future. When you fear, you can only fear the future. Because fear is a projection of your mind into what might happen.
You cannot be fear about the unknown. It's a projection of...
And so, in order to be aligned, you have to sit in between both. And when you sit in between both, you don't throw rockets on fear or back on sorrow, okay? But they're actually helping you. They're indicators. When fear comes, it means that you're too much forward. You have to come back. And when the sorrow pulls up, it means that you're pulled back. And this actually opens a very big door in even like quantum physics, and because the way we live life in modern Western society, we see it like our karma is what happens in our past, causality that pushes us, like from our back into the future, right? But what would happen if I told you that our future is pulling us forward? The whole concept turns around. And the truth is, it's neither one or the other. In order to be here and now, those two strings need to be calibrated. And when those two strings are calibrated, you obtain a first level of alignment. There are two more, maybe for another session.
We were discussing about human evolution, we were discussing about cultures, how to improve yourself and the world today. But in a perspective of what we are living, we are in the best moments in human history. In the end, we are having such a compact and such a disturbing context and very contrasty, in which we are having so much bliss and so much dark side, and in all this context, we are seeing the evolution of disruptive technologies, and on the other side, we are seeing people more open to coming back to what means spirituality or discovering themselves.
So, first of all, we have a conflict of interests because we are part of it. If you're a piece on the chessboard, you cannot understand the game. And even if you would understand the game, you would only understand it from your function and your potential and risk, So the conflict of interest is there. And I think it's very important in order for us to be true to ourselves, to understand that we have it. We are part of this world, We consume, we pollute, We don't know how the future of our children will be. We don't know if we are good kids regarding our parents. It's all there. But at the same time, it goes back to that fear and sorrow. What can I really change except what I'm doing now? And is it important to spend time in those two directions? That's number one. Number two, the world is chaotic. Okay? Chaos is necessary. Okay? People suffer. It's part of it. Cruelty exists, Those weird people we start to learn about and that are coming out, we see Epstein files and all of that. It's there, okay? But beware that it doesn't happen through you. That's my number one advice. Because if we don't accept cruelty, and that we understand that it's part of, like, the chaos is part of the system, we will suffer because of its existence, or we will close our eyes and do as if it's not there. That's number one. On the other side, when we know that it exists, it will tempt us because it's much bigger than individuals. And there we need to be aware not to engage with the small finger into that direction. So that's number one. Number two, what hurts us the most, especially in the West, is positivism. And that goes back to those people who close their eyes and only try to see the good part. Because the more you go on that side, the more there is light, the more you project shade. So the darkness is created by that light in a certain way. And the serenity, the peace happens when those two forces harmonize and leave, That's the way I see it. very personal opinion.
But do you feel or do you think that we are living a transition to a different age, to jumping into a different dimension, into becoming the new human, into accessing the golden age of humanity, a new cycle of evolution, and all these things, however you want to put it?
These things are within the collective unconscious since biblical pharaoh, old areas. This is nothing new. Everybody is talking about the Messiah and the Dune movie, but it's very important to keep in mind that you should, well, it's interesting to not engage on it on a level where it becomes a fantasy, It's not a fantasy. And the fantasy, it takes us away from the reality. And when it takes us away from the reality, we actually won't have synchronicity. And that's the most dangerous, disease on a spiritual level, to be trapped in a fantasy, And a lot of people, unfortunately, are locked there. The good part is that to get out of fantasy doesn't need a lot of effort. When you turn on the light, you turn it on. When you turn it off, you turn it off. It's not a quest. And so a lot of people try to hike a mountain, and to get out of whatever state, while they might be able to do that switch within 30 seconds. So please don't climb mountains for nothing.
And today, what would you like the people to know from you? If it will be a message from your soul, a message that, let's say, hypothetical, that it will be your most important statement that you're having at this point in your life, what would that be?
I think that it's very important that we don't lose our faith in life. We live in a world where everything starts to burn. And the higher the temperature goes, the more we want to escape. So it's very important to be kind to ourselves and to be kind to the others and to be okay even though the temperature rises, I'm not talking about climate change here, but it's more spiritual. But yes, go back to your nature. Go back to hug a tree, Yeah, go back to nature. Have a swim, play, have fun. Easy.
And the last question, we are saying in the Awareness Club that we are promoting the elevation path. And the elevation path says that no matter where in life you are, how aware or not, or from what difficulties you are passing, you are always synchronized with what you need to encounter, and you are having at your disposal the tools that at that moment you can use in your favor, no matter if they are practices or therapies and so on. What would be your guidance into elevating the oneself?
The key today is reduction. Less scrolling, less TV, less Netflix, less junk food, less arguments, less overthinking. It's all about less now. We reached the maximum. And once we are able to get into that sobriety level, then it's interesting to look for quality in things, like refining our taste, our palate. It's very interesting because in our digestive system, we have a first digestion, which is made by the stomach, which is rough and which is quantity. But then we have our intestines, that do the fine tuning. They look for the savors. They look for the colors. They look for the qualities. And in Chinese medicine, it's not our stomach that's linked to our heart, but our intestines. So it's the quality that nourishes the heart, not the quantity. Very important.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for being here. It was a great pleasure to discuss all of this with you.
Same here.
I would definitely stay hours, and I hope I will have you back again here on this chair.
With pleasure. Thank you.
As for all of you, I hope you like this episode. Please like, comment, and most important, subscribe to our channel so you can be updated with our future podcasts. And give us your thoughts, how we can improve, what we can do better. Until next time, take care of yourself.